I'm going to welcome, if Theo will let me, if everything is okay technically, we will welcome our moderator, Mark Watts. He is the Executive Director of C40 and his panel to the stage.
Right, well, thank you. So I'm Mark Watts. I'm the Executive Director of C40 Cities, which is an organisation of the mayors of mostly very big cities in the world working together on climate. And indeed, it was interesting listening to that last discussion. One of the things we've been working on is supporting cities to more quickly electrify their bus fleets. And I can tell you that the two regions in the world that are way ahead of everybody else, China first, but then Latin American cities got the biggest electric bus fleets, not the richer North American or European cities. So I think it can be a solution that transfers all around the world. So we are looking here at system solutions for climate resilient cities. So looking at the mayors, the city leaders that have come to this COP have come not to talk about long-term targets for mid-century, but to work together on immediate action. Goal in C40 is halving emissions by 2030. And we're part of a big coalition, over 1,000 cities and municipalities around the world now committed to those targets. And we, with our wonderful panel here, are going to be talking today across looking at how we combine social economic justice with climate indicators in the urban field, collaboration, and we've got a good spread of public and private and different levels of government here on the panel today, which is probably the point at which I should introduce everybody. So sitting closest to me is Clare Wildfire, who is the Global Practice Lead for Cities at Mott MacDonald. Next to her is Carlo Castelli, and I did the British pronunciation of Carlo there. Carlo will pronounce his name properly. Head of City Solutions for the UK and Europe at Jacobs. And next to him is Philip Glanville, who is the Mayor of Hackney, but also Chair of London Council's Transport and Environment Committee. And then finally, at the end, it's Nuin-Tara Key, who is the Deputy Director of Climate Resilience in the California Governor's Office of Planning and Research. So we're at an innovation forum, and I'm going to start by talking about how the things that we need to change in the way that we work. So one of the things with the climate crisis is it means we've all had to change our field of vision. We have to start from working within ecological boundaries and then still deliver the economic, the social, the profit goals that we had before. That might mean at a government level discarding GDP growth as the main indicator of success. It might mean in a corporate level adding something to the profit target, but easier said than done for everybody. And I know all of you have really worked on this. So Claire, starting with you, what's your starting point when you're confronting that changed field of vision and the new indicators?
Thank you. So nearly 10 years ago, I was lucky enough to work on a leader program called Smart Sustainable Districts. So district scale, not city scale. But it really was ahead of its time in using some convening power and some learning across city districts. And there were three things. I've got my ubiquitous three things to tell you. So the first one was about bringing the local stakeholders together. So the private investment that was there in the districts. And particularly, there was one district I remember where they had their indicators, their sustainability indicators, but they weren't really being taken up by the developer. So the exercise that we did was just create the neutral space for the conversation where the win-wins could be understood. And that then unlocked the movement that otherwise had been fairly stuck. So next thing is bring your citizens along with you, and that includes sharing the bad news as well as the good news. And when we're talking about citizens, this is not just the visible majority, but the minority, the invisible minority. So on that program, and since then, there have been conversations about red light districts and sex workers and things, because those are the people who are only just bringing their heads above water, and we need to involve those in the conversation. And we were coming up with innovative ways to do that. So I think understanding what motivates those citizens, because it's probably not what you expect. And if there's time, I can share more about what we learned there. And I'm just noticing, look at my chair. I'm going to come back to you, right? So final point, building on that citizen conversation is the co-benefits. The things we want to do that I can see that often there are these virtuous and vicious circles. And just one tiny example in the resilience space, which is an amazing study done in Toronto about street trees. And they added something like 5% more street trees. And the value, they went to the local community and they were trying to understand what value that brought to that society, and it was equivalent to something like being paid $10,000 more, $10,000 more per annum, yeah, or being 7 years younger. What's not to like about that? So value exists in surprising places.
Wow, I'm definitely stealing that. I'm going to be repeating that to mayors for the rest of this week. Carlo, from your perspective.
Thank you so much, and it's a pleasure to be here and with such a distinguished panel. I think I would definitely kind of start from a strong vision. A strong vision has to be deliverable, ambitious, and really kind of oriented to kind of the value creation that Claire also was talking about. I think if you really, we need to kind of subvert completely the equation at the moment. There's a lot of kind of concentration and focus on the cost side of things, but rather I think we should really kind of push the bar and keep the bar raising and raising. And we need to kind of, do that, and we have to listen. In order to do that, we need to kind of really focus on the why and the who, in my mind. We can't really kind of say, well, the why is sorted, 1.5 degree, and then kind of move on to the how. I think we need to kind of keep the why, kind of, makes us awake in the morning, kind of get up and with the energy and to go beyond the extra mile, and really kind of keep that why with us all the time. If you do that, then you can really look at the value creation piece, and we are getting better and better at defining this kind of shared benefit, co-benefit that Claire was talking about, and really kind of putting those at the core of a renewed equation, what I call purpose case approach, not business case approach anymore, and really kind of capture social, economic, environmental, and cultural values to really understand and reappraise projects in a different manner altogether. I think if we tick all those boxes, I think we're going to be in a good place. But that kind of shared benefit is also all happening and helping with the whole stakeholder piece as well. Thank you.
Great. Okay, Philip, taking the mayoral perspective on the same question.
Thanks, Mark. I'm very excited that Carlo lives in Hackney as well. Carlo does. So we're both 7 years younger because of our street tree program, which is good to hear. 50% increase, though, in 4 years in street trees, which I think is really important. But it's just sort of, from the C40 perspective, I'm Mayor of Hackney, but I work very closely with the Mayor of London. And I think what's really clear of how the Mayor of London's unpacked climate is setting that 2030 target for net zero in London. Many of the London boroughs, following climate emergency motions in 2019, also set somewhere between 2030 and 2040 targets. So really more ambitious than government. And I think wherever we come out of the sort of optimistic speaker from a second ago from Toddington, we know that cities are more ambitious than national government. And I think that's where we start. And also our citizens tend to be more ambitious than national government. We've done some polling as London councils and explored that in more detail. And I think you've seen from the partnership that the Mayor of London and London councils have developed coming out of COVID, a green recovery is the prism at which we're looking at it. So we are taking the Green New Deal sort of principles of growing London's green economy, looking at the contribution of London's green economy to levelling up, which is the sort of great term in the UK, and then how do we link that back into a green dividend in our communities in terms of jobs and skills and benefit? Because what I agree with Claire on, if we stay just at the carbon level, if we stay at just sort of 1.5, we're missing those opportunities to really connect with some of those other issues that our communities are going through. So if I think about fuel poverty in my own borough, the sort of cost of living crisis that many in the UK are going into this winter, if you start from a carbon neutrality perspective, or you start from talking about retrofit, that isn't where people are. They're thinking about, is my home going to be warm, cosy and affordable to heat this winter? And then where do you put the investment to unlock that? And I think that's where I would differ somewhat from where national programmes have been. What I'm really keen to see is that we see programmes delivered in and with communities. And I think that's where cities and local government can really, unlock the apprenticeships, unlock the skills transfer, really deliver those co-benefits that people are talking about. If we fail, I think we'll fail on net zero, but we'll also fail to take that opportunity to transform our communities for the better. And I think that's relevant when we're talking about decentralised energy, whether retrofit, whether how we approach waste and recycling. All of these issues come back to citizens, businesses and people in places. And I think that's what we can really deliver if we focus on the city and the local. I also recognise that there's a rural dimension, the seaside towns, there's all sorts of other communities and levels of local government. But I think if we crack it in cities, we can really make that difference.
And that's really interesting that, quite often inability to have public support for the more difficult measures is sort of cited as a reason for going a bit slower than the science would demand. But what you're saying, Philip, actually, the public's with you on climate action, you've polled it, but finding the specific way in, the specific issue that's going to unlock the support is where you have to put your focus. Okay, so we'll move on to, the slightly broader perspective from the state level now.
Yeah, wonderful. So thank you so much for the invitation to be here. So I'm from the state of California, and so bringing that lens, but echoing everything the panelists have said already here, there's so much synergy across all of the scales and perspectives here on the stage. So from the state of California perspective, and I bring the climate resilience lens, we take a very broad view on resilience and recognizing that we have to take a systems approach. So really appreciate everything that's been said already, and recognizing that people don't live in silos. They don't live in a transportation world and an energy world and a job world, employment world. They live in communities, and we really need to, as Carlos was saying, I think set that vision for what is it that we want our communities, what do communities want, and how do they want to live in the face of a changing climate, while also addressing, meeting our accelerated and ambitious emissions reduction goals. So from that broad view, from our work that we do in my office at the state, we really take a view of how do we create the enabling environment to allow cities to lead, to allow communities to identify the solutions they know need to be put in place, and how do we provide the right resources and tools and capacity within communities to drive that change. So in California, we're actually updating our state adaptation strategy right now. It's out for public comment, in case anyone wants to take a look. Offer us your input and feedback. And what's really exciting about this update to the strategy is we've pivoted, building on the successes of previous state strategies, but pivoted away from a sector-based approach where we were looking at kind of what are the state actions on transportation? What are the state actions on emergency response? And instead are putting forward a vision for what the resilient outcomes we want to achieve in California. And we have 6 of those, and they're really intended to drive an integrated, intersectional, outcome-based approach on resilience. One of the goals is to use those outcomes to help state agencies inform their policy and priorities in investing in resilience, but it is also intended to be a framework that can help drive broader collective action. So our local communities know what are the state goals, how is it our work contributing to that, and also how can the state help support these broader outcomes. And one of the other pieces to this update to the state adaptation strategy that is new this go-around is actually the inclusion of metrics and targets. So under each one of our 6 priorities, we have a series of goals and then actions. And for the first time, we are including time-bound metrics for every action. These are obviously actions the state is going to take, but what it's allowing us to do is create the space to understand what's the role of the private sector in helping us track and achieve this action. What's the role of our other public sector partners, communities, counties, cities, special districts in California. And so it really is hoping, we're hoping that this new approach helps us build better collaboration, but also have increased accountability and transparency to track our progress over time, which is something in the adaptation field is, an evolving, kind of more emergent field of practice than, say, on the mitigation side, but really looking to bring partners together to help us learn and learn more rapidly so we can actually put in the right measures to reduce risk and build resilience across communities. So excited to continue the conversation here. I'll hand it back to you.
Great, really interesting. I feel we need a follow-up discussion as well. We in C40, we, as well as tracking carbon reduction, we track actions by cities because that's often the most reliable indicator of what's happening right now, whereas the carbon lags. So we're going to move on now talking about collaboration in two ways, starting with collaboration between cities, I guess, across projects in different cities. It's certainly the basis of my organisation, C40, is collaboration, the idea that if you can find the best practice, the leader in any field somewhere in the world and take that experience in other cities, everybody can move faster. So you can go at the fastest pace of those in each sector. But what are your respective experiences on genuinely achieving that collaboration? I guess particularly interested in global north to south, south to north. Let's start in a different place this time. So, Carlo, you first.
Thank you. No, I think it's interesting, and it's an interesting time at the moment because cities compete and collaborate as ever before. So it's kind of a two-way conversation that cities have. And, benchmark analysis is becoming kind of almost an integral part of our work with cities. For instance, we've now been working for 3 years with the city of Edinburgh City Council, where we actually kind of brought everything that I talked about before to life, really. So we worked with the council for now 3 years where, starting with a strong vision, help the client articulate their vision to a set of objectives and KPIs, and really kind of look at the outcomes that vision wanted to achieve on behalf of the city, huge consultation processes to really understand what citizens wanted and communities wanted, and really look at the final value of it. So that was quite amazing because, in the face of £110 million of economic benefit, we managed to measure £310 million of well-being benefits, which is transformational. I mean, it's something that, as I said before, can really subvert the approach to viability and appraisal. So I think that's, really passionate about that. From another point of view, I mean, Global South and Global North, we had, unfortunately, Bogota earlier on, not exactly kind of lucky with the technology, but Bogota and even Curitiba before, from a socially sustainable transport approach, have been transformational examples. I mean, Jaime Reiner, who's unfortunately kind of passed away recently, and Peñalosa in Bogota. Peñalosa is the author of one of my favorite quotes on city, which is, a great city is one where rich people aspire to use public transport, not where less affluent people want to have a big car. So that's a really, but it's really, the whole kind of transmillennium piece and the fact that, they managed to kind of bring affordable jobs to affordable homes. I mean, that's where really kind of this integrated approach to challenges and opportunities really come to life. And that's where the verticals really kind of come, in a different light and cross-cutting towards outcomes and benefits. So I think, we can learn a lot from the Global South, I think.
Absolutely, and the current mayor of Bogota, in fact, who was here earlier in the week, that's the city that now has the biggest electric bus fleet outside of China, and she's really pushed it. Let's keep going that way, and I'll come back to you at the end then, Claire. Philip, next.
I'm glad you did. I was ready to come in. I think there's sort of 3 C's here. There's the convening power, which I think C40 does. London Councils is a convener. There are 32 London boroughs underneath the Mayor of London and the City of London, and that convening of those London boroughs around climate is absolutely essential. And we also collaborate. So we have 7 climate themes that are led by London boroughs, creating peer-to-peer experience of things like retrofit, of decentralized energy networks. So it's not a top-down approach. It comes from us, and we're sharing that knowledge and how we've solved problems at that borough level within London. So that collaboration level coming out of convening. What we're also doing as London Councils, and the main reason I'm at COP, is last week on Finance Day and on Thursday on sort of Cities Day, we are talking about our UK Cities Climate Investment Commission, which is trying to bridge the public sector and the private sector around a proposition that can unlock all of that finance that is wanting to invest in decarbonisation and try and be that bridge between the way that the public sector addresses risk, how we procure, how we plan. And I think we're still two different worlds that know we need to talk to each other and unlock that finance. But we've done it very well on EV infrastructure, I think, in London. But when we're talking about some of the more tricky bits, I think we need to improve that, and that's what that report does. And do take a look. It's also done with the 11 core cities outside London. So not forgetting Leeds, Newcastle, Belfast, Cardiff, and others, because I think that collaboration is vital. The last bit, of my final C, is competition. I think competition is really helpful. It's helpful for politicians, and it's helpful for kind of bidding up with our citizens and businesses the aspiration we need to get to net zero. So whether it's street trees, I want to be in a competition with my neighbouring boroughs in London about who is going to increase our tree canopy the quickest, because it's vital for urban greening, it's vital to respond to climate change and mitigation, it's vital on sustainable urban drainage, and that should be a competition we're all proud of. And other areas around kind of active travel, school streets, all of that can really lead to greater innovation and feed back up through the collaboration and the convening. I think they're all really important. Where competition, I think, is bad is where you've got top-down government resources and bidding rounds, and you've got very short-term competition for funding, and you're not planning strategically, and you're sort of jumping through hoops that ultimately fail. And I think there's quite a lot of evidence, it's not just this government, it's previous governments, where you've got an initiative, you want to get it out there, but you're not grounded it in kind of delivery that allows citizens and businesses and communities to collaborate. And I think that's where competition can be bad. In my experience. Perhaps we'll explore that a bit more in greater detail.
Great. I guess, I think you really notice that competition between cities, don't you? But it is a race to the top. You're trying to attract investment, talented people by making your borough, the city, a more livable place. It's not like the people over in wherever it is, the blue zone, when they compete, it tends to end in a war, a trade war or using armaments. But Nuin-Tara, same question for you.
Great. So, I think in California is the 5th largest economy in the world. If we were our own country, recognizing the convening power that we have, but also the, ability to kind of inform global conversations. We have definitely taken collaboration very seriously and, really see the power in working together, outside of our borders within the U.S. and, globally to really drive change. And so California, was one of the co-founders and launched the Under 2 Coalition, which, was bringing together communities from around the world to share practices, share learnings, and also talk about, some of the challenges and share resources to really drive change. So very committed there. Within California, and actually going back to our resilience program that we run out of our office, the collaboration, and I love your 3 C's. I will borrow that if I may. I'll give you credit. But the collaboration is really central to the work that we're doing to build resilience. And through our program, which was created through state statute, so this will continue on, which I think is a great model, is we're charged with convening a council that brings together not just state agency, but also our local and community partners, community-based organizations, private sector, and boundary organizations. And the council really guides and informs our work of our program that we're doing at the state and creates this space for, I don't want to say two-way because there are many voices at the table, but this dialogue to really understand what's happening on the ground, where are their challenges, how can the state support, but also how do we as the state, again, provide that kind of enabling framework and structure to help guide that collective path forward. So, definitely looking to the power and role of convening and collaboration, both within the work we're doing day to day in our communities, but also broadly and learning from communities around the world.
Great. And finally on this one, Claire, collaboration across the world.
Okay, I'm going to tackle the Global South question because, quick plug for Mott MacDonald, I'm delighted to work for a company that has international development as part of its strands of work. So what struck me is that what's happening in the Global South is they are adapting. they are thinking about where they're going to move their communities because they'll be underwater. And for them, it's survival. They just have to get on with it. I can see that some of the things that are happening from that, say really sophisticated, some of the most complex early warning systems in the world, because they need to know when the danger is coming. And we're involved in a UK-Bangladesh partnership, which is sort of shared learning in both directions. So it's good to see that there's learning coming in both ways.
Correct. Okay. We're going to stick on the theme of collaboration, but perhaps and just say to the organiser, I can't see a timer at the moment, so can someone advise me when we're getting to the end? There's nothing on the screen. Now there is. Great. All right. We've got 9 minutes left. Thank you. So sticking on collaboration, because we've got an interesting mix on the panel here, public and private, and I guess everyone in this room would believe that public-private partnership is going to be essential for delivering around climate and justice targets, but I guess we have all experienced good public-private partnership and bad public-private partnership. So I'm going to divide the panel a little bit here, but perhaps if we start with you Philip, what would you be looking for from Carlo and Clare in order to have a good public-private partnership?
I'm going to write it down.
No pressure. I think it's an understanding of shared objectives. So there's a lot of work that we've done around green procurement, and social value procurement. And so when we procure, we're looking for apprenticeships. We're looking to get some of the skills. We know that there's expertise from the private sector. We're not in the business of setting up our own construction company yet, or necessarily our own heat pump factory or anything like that. So we know that technology is out there, but I'm really committed to the idea that you don't get sort of closed technologies that you don't end up being able to maintain. And I'm a landlord as Hackney Council. We manage directly around 32,000 homes. If we're to take those to net zero, I want the technologies that allow us to install that technology, to maintain it, and to do what we do now. I employ gas fitters. I want to be able to transition those jobs. I want to be able to transition that expertise. And then I think there's the risk appetite and how we share risk. Is it blended finance? Is it going to be just private finance? Is it that technology transfer? And I think it's going to be different depending on the area that we're collaborating on. And I think we've shown in London a really good example around EV infrastructure of government funding, TfL, boroughs, private technology, shared platform, shared data, and hopefully making it simple for the consumer who ultimately doesn't want to be driving around London looking for a charging point and then finding it's broken, or that it's the wrong type of charging point, or it's not rapid, or it's over. Those sorts of things, I think, that really matter to me. So I think we've got to understand our objectives. We've got to understand that it has the wider social value, and I think we can then do it. And I really do value those partnerships that we've built up. We're out, and I know some people that have bid for it are in this august tent. We're out for 3,000 charging points in Hackney that we want to install over the next 10 years. That is a really important signal to the market that we're serious about investing in EV infrastructure and using our sort of procurement power to get that into the hands of businesses and residents in Hackney.
Great. So very, very clear and specific example. And Nuin-Tara, is it the same kind of approach from your perspective?
Yeah, very much. I would also go back to where Carlo started, which is around the shared vision and really recognizing the urgency of action that is needed today to address climate change around the world, and that to really solve the problem, everybody needs to come to the table and bring solutions, and we all need to find, as you were saying, who has the right expertise to join the conversation at a specific point or bring that expertise to bear. But really, it is all hands, and we all need to kind of show up looking for the solutions and bringing our expertise to really get us to that vision and to that goal that we are working towards.
Great. So let's turn it the other way. So you've kind of heard there's definitely a desire to have good public-private partnership, but what do you need to see, Clare, from these guys for you to be wanting to be bid for those tenders or wanting to be walking into the office and talking about those shared objectives?
Okay, I think it's along similar lines. So we created a report called A Place-Based Approach to Net Zero, but in fact, the things we came out with still hold for resilience as well. And it had 4 Ps, which is powers, partnerships, digital platform, and people. But it's the partnerships one that I was going to pick out. And the interesting thing is the advice I say, and I think you're already doing it, especially on, Philip, the UK Cities Climate Cities Investment Commission, which is take time to find out what it looks like from the other side of the fence, because then you understand the risk levers of that private finance, which means you'll get it cheaper, I suppose, and that's the ultimate goal, is to create that win-win situation.
Great, and Carlo?
Shall I give it a go? I've noted down everything, but I think from my point of view, would be to keep up with the leadership that public authorities and public sector in general are showing at the moment. I just want to make an example, and I think, again, kind of going back to the collaboration theme, there's some really interesting stuff going on at the moment, whereby you have, a good mix of top-down and bottom-up. We need certainly bottom-up, but also we need kind of that leadership, particularly from a public sector point of view, in order to de-risk projects and really enable the private sector to come in and deliver what they're best at. We're working very closely with Enfield Council, which is a little bit north of where we are living. And that's a public sector-led development, 10,000 homes, 6,000 jobs, 40% affordable housing. And that is actually where the Enfield Council has actually taken the leadership as master developers and really working closely with the private sector on a phase-by-phase basis to really make sure that after pasteurization plans fall in place, those phases get delivered and those homes get delivered to local communities. So I think that really and again, going back to my point initially, raise the bar, keep raising the bar, because if we do so, then we can look at the funding and finance piece and find the money somewhere. That's not a problem. Let's be optimistic.
Great. Well, we have got just time to do a question that's come in from online. I did a whole panel earlier where everyone had to answer within a minute. So this is going to be less than that, 30 seconds each. But as Bogota has been mentioned a few times, we have a question here from someone in the city of Bogota. What concrete actions are cities taking right now which are having a measurable impact on decarbonisation? I think we've heard a few examples. I'll give you a second one and you can choose between them. And how can cities address climate justice and how does it vary between global north and global south? So I think we have to start at this end, don't we, to be fair? Sorry.
All right, 30 seconds. I'm going to take the second question.
Right.
And I think one of the things that is really important is recognizing, as many people know, that climate change is just exacerbating existing inequities and existing inequities within our systems, our economies, and our structures, and that if we don't couple climate adaptation and mitigation action with driving on equitable outcomes, especially for communities who are most at risk, we will not achieve resilience. We cannot be resilient if we leave communities behind. And so I think fundamentally it has to be driven through an equity perspective to actually be driving towards the goals that we want. So 30 seconds.
It was 30 seconds. Brilliant. We'll come back this way, Philip.
I'll combine the two. I think you can't do it without social justice, as I said at the start. I think there's some real lessons from the Global South where perhaps the economic settlement hasn't worked. So I think there's a resurgence of the municipality and the public role, and then recognising then from that prism, how do you get the collaboration? I appeared on a panel where people were really reaching for that sense of public ownership around some of the assets that we will create. So some of the energy assets, I think we've seen at London Council's level and we've seen in Hackney, doing that with communities is really powerful because you get a lasting community dividend. And I think there's also a sort of point about energy resilience there, that if you own the asset and you're selling the energy back to your local population, some of the market movements we're seeing at the moment, you can sort of mitigate. And I think that's quite powerful. And I've seen that from South America, and I think we can bring that home to London.
Perfect. And Carlo?
Focus on the why. If we focus on the why, we're going to go beyond the divide between global south and global north. If you take London, global city, but there's huge swathes of area, which are arguably definable as global south, with huge inequality issues. So the why is actually helping us to bridge bridges and to kind of go beyond, to build the bridge with the blah, blah, blah versus kind of, it's possible or not, yeah.
Great. And Claire, you have the misfortune of being able to see that we're actually out of time, but give us a really succinct answer.
Okay, so carbon in cities is mainly transport and buildings. And I've seen something called local area energy planning that is happening in the UK, which is where cities are encouraging integration of those things. So thinking about transport and energy, be it heating and cooling, together in the same system. So it comes back to the points we've made earlier about thinking in systems will yield better benefits than thinking in silos.
Brilliant. We have to end it there. Let's start by giving a big round of applause to our fantastic panel.